Welcome back, everybody. It's great to have you again. And last week, we were looking at the role of compassion in Jesus' life. Remember that we're talking about the historical Jesus, not necessarily the picture that we see in the New Testament, which has a lot of reflection from the early church. But if we're looking back to who was this guy walking around Palestine teaching in the first century before the church had time to reflect on it and expand their understanding of him, then what would he look like? And Borg argued that compassion was kind of the central value in his teaching. Today, we're going to start a two-Sunday look at the role of wisdom in the life of Jesus. There are kind of two sides to the coin here. One is looking at Jesus as a teacher of wisdom. I wanted to put a couple of verses up here that Borg did not cite, right? And I put the Greek up there and translate it in English, and didn't delete the Greek, so they're both up there. But if we read those two verses, we can see kind of two different functions of wisdom. The first one says, wisdom is justified by her deeds, right? There, wisdom is personified, right? Wisdom is a person. The context here is Jesus is talking about John the Baptist, and John the Baptist has just been imprisoned. And he says, people talk about John and they say he neither ate nor drank. You know, he had a very ascetic lifestyle. And they said he had a demon. Right? And here I come, both eating and drinking. And they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard. Right? And he says, but wisdom is justified by her deeds. Right? Is his response. So it's kind of like, well, don't think about what we eat or don't eat. Look at what we do. Right? And he has wisdom personified. Wisdom there in next Sunday, we'll look at that aspect of wisdom. Wisdom as a person in Jesus' identification with that person. So Jesus as the wisdom of God. That will be next Sunday. Look at the other verse from Mark 6:2. There's no, okay, I'm sorry. Just a moment. Okay. The other, Mark 6:2 says, where did he get these things? What wisdom has been given to him? Here, wisdom is not personified. It's something that's in Jesus' teaching. Right? Jesus is teaching wisdom. And people are saying, oh my goodness, who is this guy? What are these things? Where does this wisdom he's teaching come from? And so today, that's what we're going to look at. Jesus as a teacher of wisdom. And then next week, Stephanie will lead us in the discussion of Jesus as wisdom. Jesus as the personification of wisdom.
I don't know if it's driving them crazy. If you're moving your knees and your image is jumping up and down, and they're having to see that, can you put that?
Can we just get you a chair?
Well, yeah, maybe a chair to sit it on.
Yeah.
Or
a piano bench.
Yeah, then my screen will be still. Okay. I don't know what that will do. My God. Okay. Well, that'll work. It won't bounce now. Yeah. All right. There we go. Also, Borg made a distinction between two different types of wisdom: conventional wisdom and subversive wisdom, or what he called alternative wisdom. And so we'll talk about that. The way I'll organize things this morning is we're going to talk a good bit about conventional wisdom. What is conventional wisdom? And then after having looked at that a good bit, we'll go to subversive wisdom, which Borg argues that Jesus was the teacher of subversive wisdom or alternative wisdom, an alternative to the conventional wisdom. So he points out a couple of things, images that are kind of central to Jesus. Jesus talks about a path, a lot of times a way. There's, in fact, he contrasts two ways. And this is something that's not unique to Jesus. Sages in various cultures have used this same image, that there are two paths you can follow in life. You can follow the broad path, or you can follow the narrow path. And so we'll see that showing up in Jesus' teachings. Jesus will talk about the narrow path as a path leading to what in some cultures we might call enlightenment, or leading to the kingdom of God, leading to right relationship with God. That image, by the way, I took that as in a walk in the woods one day. It just happened that the light was at the end of the bed. That's Benji in the picture there.
Right. Wow. Was that around here like that?
Yeah, that's in due force. Yeah. And so,
Nice to know we can get on the narrow path.
yeah.
And then you join the light.
Just walk to the light.
On your hike, right? Yeah.
Yes.
On your point.
Well, let's go back to the two, just like there are two types of wisdom, conventional wisdom and alternative wisdom or subversive wisdom. There are two ways, two forms of speaking that are pretty common. They're not correlated with those two types of wisdom, but two ways of speaking that we find in sages using, not just Jesus, but in general. They tend to tell stories, parables, right? And sprinkle throughout their thought aphorisms, those little short, pithy sayings. They're easy for everybody to remember. And we can easily, reading through the Gospels, we can see those things in Jesus' teaching. So here are a few aphorisms, and you could probably just come up with others that you remember from Jesus' teaching, right? A person does not live by bread alone. It's really easy to remember. That one, by the way, he's taking from Deuteronomy. He's kind of reworded it a little bit, but it's something that he said that we all recognize and remember. Leave the dead to bury the dead. These are things that Borg points out that we find them in a particular context in the Gospels. But if we look carefully, they may be in different contexts in different Gospels. Right? They may be in one story in Luke and in another story in Mark. Well, he points out that that's probably pretty true to what actually happened. That Jesus probably didn't say a person lives by bread alone only once. Right? That's probably a part of his teaching that he would say all over the place. He would remind people of that. And so the different gospel writers simply pick it up and they put it in what might be a typical setting or a typical, we shouldn't read the Gospels and think, well, this is exactly when he said that. It's just a representative setting that might represent something.
But it is true that a blind person cannot lead a blink person.
Oh, did I write a blink person? Oh, that was cute. That's it. Can a blind person read a blind person? No, well, yeah. Well, can a blind person lead a blind person without both falling to a pit? There's again aphorism, just a short saying that Jesus finally said many, many times in different contexts.
I don't know how it works in most churches. I grew up Catholic. And every saint had a very specific teaching that you had to believe was exactly what Jesus meant.
Yeah.
Right? like,
Right.
at least according to the nuns at the
Yeah.
school where I attended. For example, a person does not live by bread alone.
Yeah.
That meant we had to go to communion on Sunday because that was
Yes.
the real sustenance that we needed.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know how those were explained. I
Yeah.
mean, I can almost remember, the context of most of these in the Gospels where I read them, but, but I don't know, where you taught, you grew up pretty immersed, most people here, I think, grew up pretty immersed in Baptist.
I was thinking when he was talking in that part where he talks about everyday wisdom or conventional wisdom sort of falling into a set of rewards and punishments or
Yeah.
incentives to go along with the culture. And that even a wisdom teacher like Jesus could be sort of turned into somebody who gave you rules. And
Yeah.
I made a note in the version that this kind of what's taught to children because
Yeah.
you want to give a simple application. So here's,
Yeah.
a simple application of a person does not live by bread alone
Yeah.
is, okay, here's the bread of life.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between those two breads?
Yeah.
And I just wonder if somewhere in his thinking, he's also sort of indicting a religious teaching that doesn't go beyond that way we teach children. Simple views of life and simple applications.
Yeah.
I mean, you all are with Bernard a lot on Sundays. Do you find yourself sort of talking about what did you learn in Sunday school?
Our school, or,
Yeah.
every day, what did you learn today? Just
Yeah.
Going through the day.
Yeah.
And, but I was thinking, any one of these could potentially have multiple interpretations.
Yes.
But in the Catholic Church, everything is mediated by authority, right? So they
Right.
tell you what,
What the correct
and maybe in Sunday school that tends to happen anywhere because children, but the rest of us, we should be maybe more open to
Yeah.
sort of light our lives.
And I wonder if even, I mean, surely Catholics don't, well, I don't know, what do I know, what they teach in Catholic seminaries, but surely they don't tell the priest, this is what you have to teach. I mean, I can't imagine doing theological education that way, at that level. So how does it filter down that in so many cultures and so many places, we have to have the right interpretation, because it is hard work to try to figure out what it means for me. I mean, what does leave the dead to bury the dead mean? I mean,
Yeah.
I have obligations towards my dad who's going to die any moment, and I feel guilty that I'm not doing more with my life and my training to help people. Is this speaking to me or is this not?
I think that's one of the hardest. I don't think at the time it was delivered, it made, perfect blinding sense. And I think it's a hard one.
Yeah.
I agree, it is a hard one. I mean, Borg talks about this in the context of family obligation.
Right.
And that's not just the dead,
Yeah.
as Maria says. And I really struggle with the idea of stepping away because, but I also recognize that family draws me to North Carolina and plants me firmly here.
Right.
I wouldn't want to leave this area because I have so many ties.
Yeah.
And so it does constrain what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think Borg was kind of onto something when he talked about the fact that dead can mean so many different things, right? It's not just physically dead, but spiritually dead, dead to the needs of others, whatever, many different metaphorical meanings. Unfortunately, in the gospel text, they the place that they decided to embed this saying is in a very literal place, where a guy said, let me go bury my father.
I will follow you, but first.
Let me go bury my father. Well,
That's very literal.
yeah, that's very, very literal.
That would have been a non-pastoral moment for Jesus.
Yes. Yes, and so it makes it hard because it is tied to a very literal interpretation there, but it clearly can mean so much more than that. You know,
But as a former pastor, I can tell you,
yeah.
family obligations are the absolute top excuse everybody uses for not making commitments to it.
Right.
That's
And
true.
I, you know, I had people who would say, I can't teach Sunday school, or I can't help with the children, or I can't, because my elderly mother, well, your elderly mother lives in a different country. Yeah, but any day she might call me and,
As
you know.
church moderator, I can tell you that is still true. I have heard a lot about Asian parents. You know, last year as I've run into people that way.
And I tell you, my mother used to get so angry at me. She actually agreed to have physical therapy and give up on dying when I said, I'm gonna quit my job and come take care of you. And she said, absolutely not. You know, it just, I think most of our parents want us to live our lives. And if they are people of faith, they would give us their blessing, you know, in most cases. But there's also, I think the church sometimes makes it difficult. I saw this in the Black church, where the parents wanted the children to make an appearance and look the part of good, dedicated Christians. Wear the right colors, join the ushers or this or that. And I'm sorry, church moderator, but when the kids said, I want to go do summer mission work, we were chairing the missions committee, and we had parents say, also get mad at us. They have obligations at home. They need to spend the summer here with their mama. And so, you know,
I'd
it
like to
just,
go back to that conundrum that you both talked about, that when you're trying to involve people in sort of helping with the work of the church, and people say, I have these family obligations that I'm really tied down by. A prophetic voice would say, you know, first things first, seek ye first.
Yeah.
So that'd be the prophetic voice. And the pastoral voice might be, and I'm sure both of you used it, how can we help you with these obligations that feel so straining? And so I think that's part of the difficulty that often what we single out as Jesus' wisdom has more to do with the kind of change your life. You know, choose what's most important. We single those out as wisdom, but I think there's a wisdom in coming closer to people and saying,
Yes.
how can I help you with what feels so immovable?
Well, and, you know, to drift back to last week, this particular one, the response doesn't sound compassionate at all. And I'm sort of fascinated by that.
Yeah.
You know,
but if the guy had said,
Yeah.
my father is sick, come with me,
Right.
he wouldn't have said, oh, go
Let him die.
let him die, come with me. I think, I think that
Yeah.
the difference is why, and I'm guessing, and you know, this is not right, but well, maybe it is. That this, let's say this is the firstborn, and when his father dies, the division of, you know, the state is going to happen, and the father is in perfectly good health, but he wants to wait and see what he's going to inherit and how he is going to be set up before he. Right now, if he goes and follows Jesus, maybe he won't get anything. Maybe he'll be disinherited. So
I think what we're doing right now is just a wonderful example of what Borg was talking about these aphorisms. You notice there are a whole list of them there, but we've centered in on one, and we're having this wonderful discussion. We're full of rich ideas, and that's what sages do with aphorisms. They throw them out there. If they don't, it's not clear what they mean, right?
You're calling us sages.
Well, no, but Jesus as sage.
He's not calling us sages.
Yeah. Jesus, by using these, is doing what sages do in many cultures. They have these pithy things that throw out there, and it's not exactly clear what it means, but you can see the applications for the moment they're in. And then later you start thinking about it and say, well, what does that mean, right? And it's something that prompts us to thought, to discussion. It's a tool that sages use. And that's one reason that the Jesus Seminar folks say this element, if we're going to classify what was Jesus, what was the historical Jesus, he was a sage, right? Because he did this stuff all the time.
I wonder if there's one that jumps at the people that are participating virtually. You didn't mute them, right?
No,
They muted themselves.
folks at home can hear us pretty well.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I don't know if you'll want to contribute to this. I mean, it's a debate of whether this is the characterization. Do we want to think of Jesus as in this way? Clearly, there were elements to the role of a sage that fit Jesus very well, but there are maybe other things as well that we would want to throw in.
Is there one of these that jumps at you? No,
I mean, I appreciate the idea of we can interpret any of these in one way, but it goes back to the central point, I think, that Michael is working with, is the idea that the teaching of wisdom can take many forms, and those forms are subject to interpretation. So I'm not sure that my mind right now is into what does this particular parable mean to me, as much as isn't it interesting to think about the teaching of Jesus and how that teaching took place, and then historically how we have viewed that teaching, which is this whole idea of the sage in ancient time teaching and how that took place, not only what they were teaching, but then how did it manifest through the ages. So I don't know if that's relevant or not, but I'm not sure that I would say any of these are necessarily sticking out to me as being personally relevant, but I think that the relevance for me is coming from this idea of what did it mean traditionally to teach as a sage, and then how did that manifest through the ages. I may be way off base.
No,
I've been traveling, so my mind is in a lot of different places right now. So apologies if that's like way off base.
Yeah. Do you have more after those?
Well, frankly, there was only a small number that Borg mentioned. I threw in a bunch that came to mind for me, but there are many, many, many more of these in the Gospels, right? In addition, though, to aphorisms, one thing that is very common to teachers of wisdom is storytelling, right? And Jesus told many parables. Some of them, Borg pointed out, are almost as short as an aphorism. They're just really, really brief. But what makes them a parable is that they have a narrative. There's a story in there. And of course, a couple of them here that he mentioned, he talked about the prodigal a good bit in this chapter. He mentioned the good, he calls it the Good Samaritan. I think I like to think of it as the compassionate Samaritan a bit more. But those are two that we could probably, I would guess that probably anybody in the room could summarize both of those the stories.
Mhm.
You know, that was the gospel reading for today, the prodigal.
It is. Oh my goodness. Well, last Sunday it was kind of freaky how close his sermon was to what we had discussed in here. And I guess that's going to happen again today. But
But the parallel to me, both the parables and the aphorisms, is that Jesus, as a teacher of wisdom, is not just saying, here is wisdom, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to think.
yeah,
He forces you to sort of process it, choose what
Yeah.
means something to you, just as we were talking about before. But these things are not clear instructions.
yeah,
They're wisdom. They're forcing you to think.
they give you a thought exercise to do.
Exactly, they require interpretation. Another thing I find about some of the parables is that as I come to different points in my life journey, I see different characters in a different light.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
if you can
shift
give
their
me
focus
something
as
that I
our
can
life
carry
changes,
with me,
don't they?
then I've got the story, and I can hang on to the story and then kind of move around it.
Yeah, right.
I like that.
Yes.
Don't you think it speaks to the mystery of God, that God's word is shifting and changing and evolving?
Yeah.
Yes.
I do too.
It does, thinking of Jesus and this role of sage does kind of, to me, has a liberating aspect to it, because it's not that he was teaching exactly what you have to believe, so much as a way of thinking or a way of processing that's going to change its content depending on what's happening in your life.
Exactly.
And so these stories do that. Right? The focus of the Good Samaritan or the Compassionate Samaritan may be slightly different when I was 20 than it is now. Right? And so the stories.
I think, I don't know if any of you have read the book by Henry Nouwen, The Prodigal. It's based on the painting, and it also takes, all the different characters and analyzes them, and it's very, very powerful. But I think part of the reason for the story is when you tell the audience, do this, or this is right, or this is wrong, immediately you have a person ready to debate you or ready to challenge you. But you tell somebody, let me tell you a story, and they listen to the story, I think it forces you to empathize with characters, with real people, not with ideas. But, they say that high school students who read novels score much higher in empathy levels than kids who do not engage with literature. And that actually teaching kids to think about characters and their situations helps them evolve their interpersonal relationships. And I think it's just something interesting to me that he gets these teachers of the law and these people who are used to debating and reading Torah and having these big debates, just stop in their tracks and admit to something as humongous as this Samaritan is showing the compassion that God, man, tells us to show, which is something that, wasn't part of their debates. Their debates were about Samaritan religion and theology and stuff. So I think maybe that's how we should look. I don't know. I think it's how the church has looked. Maybe it's not enough how the church has looked. Who are the Samaritans now? Who are we treating? What rules are preventing us from stopping and showing compassion? I don't think we're doing, I think we're doing too much criticizing the Levite and rather than stopping and asking ourselves, what does this story mean to me? Which I think is what Jesus wanted.
That's what I like about how a story functions differently from a rule teaching. Because as you were saying, the rule teaching, my daughter is in law school right now.
Oh, Lord.
She has an English major, and she said her mind is being rewired, and it isn't successful yet. Because when she was being an English major, a presentation in a story, a character invited discussion. And here's what I think. She says in law school, when one of her colleagues will answer a question by saying, I think, the professor says, oh God, no, now I've got a thinking lawyer. You don't think, you know, it's either this way or it's this way. So what I like about the wisdom teacher, are you by any chance a lawyer?
No. I just was moving. Yeah, it makes sense, though. Yeah, you know the law.
Right. I'm going to just blabber on about how a story invites a circle of commentary, and Maria might see one thing and Michael might see another thing, and we're not in opposition. We're trying to enrich the story, right?
I wonder if the nuns that taught me were more like trained like lawyers. And I just like, this is how.
One thing I think is beautiful about this, because this wisdom thing, is that it's kind of timeless too. Jesus clearly in both of these stories, I think, was attacking the Puritan system at the time. I mean, the characters in the story of the Good Samaritan, you get two clean characters, a priest and a Levite. And these people really observe the purity laws, and both of them do the wrong thing. And then this unclean person, this Samaritan, does the right thing. And so you're a part of what's going on in that story in his context, or probably an attack on the purity system. But it's not what the story does now. Right? And so the story has traveled with us, even into a different culture, a different historical context, and it still does, and it has that function of making us question and debate about our own context. And so I think that's a part of the nature of the wisdom teaching, that it continues to motivate discussion, right? And to motivate analysis and make us question conventional wisdom of our time.
It was in Clarence Jordan's story, was the Samaritan. It was an African American person. He wrote it in business. Yeah, but I wonder if we wrote it today, would be the person evicted on the street, begging for money, he's not.
Yes.
Right.
Or the undocumented person who's driving without a license, and
He's on the lowest rung.
Right. Someone you think had nothing to give. Yeah.
I wanted us to take a little time this morning to talk about our own conventional wisdom in the United States today. And I chose that picture because it's a woman at work, right? Or working remotely, maybe via Zoom, who knows, right? But she's got a paper, she's on the phone, and she's got her baby there, right? And our culture, our American culture right now, really presses this thing of work hard and you're going to make it. Right? And that's a big part of the conventional wisdom, right? Around us. Things like you'll reap what you sow. Time is money. I just put a few things there that are those aphorisms from our culture. Right?
I would add to this picture, you can do it all.
Yeah, you can do it all.
And you can look good.
And we tell our children, you can be anything you want to be. Right? And that puts a really high standard, you just work hard enough, manage your time well enough, you're gonna get there. You're gonna become what you want to become. And
Not
so-
what we want you to become.
Yes,
Well,
right,
yes,
yeah, or what we want you to become. And so we could probably come up with loads and loads of, penny saved is penny earned, all kinds of things that kind of express the core values of our society. And what Borg points out is that every society has those things, right? They have these things that express what are the key values to that society. And in every society, while those things might be good, they also have problems, right? They also lead to a negative side. And so in Jesus teaching alternative wisdom, he's attacking that negative side. That the wisdom of ancient Israel was there, and for the most part was helpful and good, but it had some really negative implications to it, and he attacked those. Well, if we're honest, we can do that with our own society. Right? That didn't disappear,
But I think a part of the problem is that, of course, you reap what you sow to some extent. But to take that to the extreme and think that anybody who's going through that hard time, that's because they didn't sow what they needed to sow, and they, that's just, what did they do wrong? No, it creates something that presents quite a bit of wisdom and logic, and maybe used as a teaching tool, makes it a norm, a rule or something to be used as a judgment tool, and in a negative way. And that's not that the wisdom was wrong. That's that we are lacking compassion and using it as an attack tool rather than as wisdom. So I think Jesus is not saying this rule is wrong. It's you guys, the purity rules. It's not bad.
Applied without compassion.
Yeah.
It becomes that centrality of compassion to Jesus' teaching. The Lord talked about it in last week's reading. Is central here.
I would think too, that the people for whom this doesn't work in our culture would be akin to the people for whom the conventional wisdom didn't work in Jesus' culture. And those were the ones that sounds like the most eager to hear him. At least that's the portrayal of the Gospels. That he ate without hands, he welcomed people who were not purity law. So if the way the culture's set up is sort of leaving you by the roadside, then you want to hear some other way of life. I mean, you're just hungry for it. Because you're not, all those rules aren't looking for you. You're maybe not a beautiful young woman. Or you somehow can't learn to read because you've got some difficulties. So how can I be in tune with my higher purpose? See what? Find someone like Jesus.
I thought that sort of thing, but the Tangi Brown Jackson hearings, where they also now young black girls can all see the possibility that they can become Supreme Court justices.
Oh my God.
They can't.
No.
Yeah, right.
It drives me
It's an
insane.
inspiring role model.
Yeah.
But this is sort of the same thing that is going to apply to everybody. There are people who it just doesn't apply.
Yeah.
They don't have that chance.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
I was thinking about that this morning because I was on call until 8 this morning, and I got a call at 5 a.m. And at 8:30 I was so tired, and I thought Barack Obama's mom woke him up at 4 in the morning to teach him English when they were living in Malaysia. And I thought of that poor woman, and how many mothers have the strength, the ability, the time, especially and I've heard so many teachers say, well, the parents are not reading, they need to be reading 20 minutes at home to their kids, and they need to be reviewing the folder and the homework, and they have no,
I have no idea what's actually
It's happening in that
home.
in that home. And I just, it breaks my heart that teachers said, sometimes think, that I'm very fair in my classroom. Everybody gets judged by the same, standard. No. Anyway, I get on. Okay.
Just, Borg points out that the conventional wisdom for any society plays some pretty big roles. He said it's the source of the super ego, the self-critical consciousness, right? We feel a tremendous sense of guilt when we don't, when we violate that core wisdom of our society. We feel bad, right? And but then it's also the source of our self-concept. When I think of who I am, a lot of those things, those little aphorisms from American society, they're part of that, right? And it's just normal that's the role that it has for us. I like his thing that the socially constructed world of the society is what that notion that's what conventional wisdom is. It's a socially constructed reality for society, and not just for the society, but for the individuals within that society. And
that's why we realize how much colleges create a space for young people to question some of those things that they have been taught, and why it's a time for quite an identity crisis, because so much of the world, the things that are right and wrong and everything, they didn't even realize that they were simply internalizing their families' aphorisms or values, and then they go off to school, and if they go on an international exchange or they go to a college that's in a different region, it's I think how Jesus would penetrate that in a society that was so closed and so regimented would be such a threat, because in our society, people are coming in and going and questioning constantly. Even if they're givens, there's still a lot of people that have, compared to Jesus' time, I guess. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I am prejudiced in thinking what the world of the first century was like, as far as they had also many questioning the Greeks and the Romans. And
I remember the first chapter when Borg is trying to set up what was the world of Galilee. He talked about it being kind of a multi-ethnic place, that possibly Jesus would have known Greek because there were many Greek speakers in the area, so Boris was not too far away. And so it wasn't kind of a backwater, as many of us were sort of taught, because that's what archaeologists thought. But it was a place with strains of different cultures.
Does the fact that you are a minority religion make people even more protective of your rules? If you are a minority religion,
right, within a majority culture,
right? Does that make people more intolerant of prophets and teachers that come and challenge, because
protect that
identity?
Well, think about when the Israelites were taken into Babylonian captivity, and there they were the minority religion. I would think if I were in that situation, I would have to pick the 7 things about my religion that really were the core to me. Maybe some songs, maybe some scriptures, maybe some things I did at home. And those would be how I hold on to. And interestingly, there's a book called The Jew and the Lotus, which is a lovely book about Jewish people who become Buddhist. But they talk about being invited by the Dalai Lama to come and speak about how they maintained their religion in diaspora, in being spread all over the world in cultures that weren't primarily Jewish, because he wanted to learn how can we preserve Tibetan Buddhism in India. And the book is fascinating. I really got a lot out of reading it because there were a number of different Jewish practitioners. There were Reform Jews and Orthodox Jews. So they had different ideas about what's the core.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm babbling on. Sorry.
No,
But it's such a
it's
fascinating question.
And if you see Americans overseas, when when we have been in Peru among missionaries or expats, and you guys know the expat communities, they are more American than the Americans in the US, right? Every holiday, we knew a family in Peru that made their own ketchup, for goodness sakes, because you couldn't have a 4th of July without ketchup. Yeah.
Well, that's true.
So you become more attached to what's right and what's wrong in your culture.
Borg also points out that different religious communities, well, we can talk about the society of art. We also apply this notion of conventional wisdom to religions. Within a religious community, there's a body of conventional wisdom, right, that defines for us our image of God, for example, that borrows a lot from not only from the teachings of our religion, but from the culture around us, and not only of God, but God or the gods, right? Or even in non-theistic religions, conventional wisdom helps define that ideal that's there behind the religion. That symbol up in the top, the yellow one with the bars, that's from Aphorisms. It's an ancient Egyptian religion. Okay, and there's no picture of a god. It's just the circle of the sun and the rays emanating from it. Right? With an image that represented the divine. The thing to the right of it is the Arabic word for Allah. Right? You can't make images of Allah, right? And so the word becomes the symbol, right? And so, of course, the one down on the far bottom right is the section from Michelangelo's the creation of Adam, right? But it has God as an old man, right? And so, so conventional. Just remind before we start talking about alternative wisdom, he reminds us that even in our religion, an awful lot of what we're doing doesn't really come from the Bible necessarily. It's from the conventional wisdom that surrounds us, that even influences our, well, let's see. Well, we should probably start talking about alternative wisdom then, if we only have 7 minutes. Jesus teachings, and of course, from Borg's perspective, Jesus teaches that we can confirm with a high degree of probability he actually taught, are filled with things like paradox and reversals of the commonly expected thing. Right? He uses the parable of the prodigal in this regard. Right? The young man goes off, squanders his fortune on while living. When he comes back, the wisdom of the time would be, this guy deserves a real reprimand, right? And like, what do you mean, you've squandered it all? But what we see in the parable is exactly the opposite, that the father in the parable acts with compassion, and way beyond compassion, extreme generosity. Right? And so you reverse the expectation in the story, and we see that throughout Jesus' teaching, part of his alternative wisdom. He uses images like the kingdom of God is like, and there are a lot of things it's like are unclean things, right? A weed, like a woman who has lost a coin, right? Treasure is not necessarily unclean, but can be. And work comes back to this two ways. That the broad way is the way of conventional wisdom. It's the way our society says, this is the way you should live, right? And the narrow way is this alternative vision that, no, not really, that compassion should be the defining factor. And of course, he uses all those, uses imagery to get us to consider a compassionate response rather than a judgmental response or a conventional wisdom response. And so Jesus' image of God, okay, if we think of compassion as central, then we don't present God as judgmental, right? That kind of goes by the side. Also, throughout Jesus' teaching, we can see the image of Jesus as the one who supplies our needs. That's again connected to compassion, okay? And he acts like the father of the prodigal. I don't know if there are things that stood out for you as you read through the chapter about the alternative wisdom that Jesus is teaching, the alternative that he's offering to the conventional wisdom. But those are some of the things that kind of jumped out to me, that Jesus, it leads to a different image of God, a different view of who God is.
So one of the things that sort of jumped out to me is a more nuanced understanding of compassion. So he talks about, God, Jesus describing God as his eyes on the sparrow, but also acknowledges the sparrow dies.
Yes, right.
The lilies are glorious for a day, and then they get burned. Yeah. And that combination of observations is really striking, and sort of thinking, what does compassion mean? It's not that God is protecting and preserving your perfectness. It's more God is there with you.
Yeah.
Providing things for you, but he's not going to keep you from experiencing the bad things.
Yeah.
Not going to keep you from being crucified.
Right. It just is he might know how it feels to lose child.
Yeah.
And I think also Borg, I don't know how this fits into the image of God, but it does. Borg sort of struggles with whether those judgment statements, the final judgment, are teachings of the wisdom Jesus, or can be attributed mostly to Matthew, which is, a nice side step. So what came to me was, I think Jesus does want us to appreciate God's tenderness for us. And I also think that Jesus knows there is a reckoning.
Yes.
A reckoning. When you reckon with, things you would like to have transformed about yourself.
Yeah.
I just think that's true. Whether there's a final reckoning, I don't know. But there certainly are pictures of it, and they're put in the mouth of Jesus in the Gospels. So that's true.
I do think that's a really interesting thing, and that I'm fascinated to see that it is as nicely muddy as it is, because, you know, my fear was that the reckoning was clearly a teaching of Jesus, and he's pushed it away from that, and that's reassuring.
I think there is I have a little bit of, I struggle with that issue, because there is a part of any society that kind of needs that. They need to feel that the people who are abusing them are going to be accountable, right? For that, they're going to have, there is a judgment waiting for that. And so a part of compassion seems to me to imply an element of judgment, right? That compassion to the poor implies a reprimand for the wealthy who don't do anything to help them, you know. And so it's kind of hard for me to imagine Jesus teaching this compassion, which I do think he's on target there, but that is really central to Jesus' teaching, without any element of judgment in there. And so I wouldn't go maybe quite as far as he does.
But Jesus, I don't think in talking about Jesus as the teacher, Borg, I don't think he emphasizes enough Jesus as a prophet. Because I think what his parables and some of what he's saying, is trying to do, is to indict the society that has been built on this common wisdom, or what do you call it, the conventional wisdom, and create an alternative view where people are not left to die on the side of the road, where widows are not, you know, left to starve or whatever. And that is very prophetic, very, you know, and most people don't, they feel threatened by this idea that the society we have created is not fair, it's not good, it's, except of course the people that are most oppressed, and they say, yay, our champion, right? But I don't think Borg, it's not like he's presenting a paper for consideration. He is really indicting the people in power. And I don't know why that brings you, why that causes you discomfort.
It doesn't, that doesn't, Borg's, I guess what I'm uncomfortable with is his notion that that's not a part of the historical Jesus.
The judgment?
The judgment part. And so I would say I wouldn't go that far. I think there was an element of judgment.
Okay, I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were saying that you weren't comfortable with the idea of Jesus.
No, I think that was a part of Jesus. And so I would, on the historical Jesus, I would just land in a little bit of a different place from where he does.
I was very embarrassed that I said,
I mean, Borg wrote so many books.
Oh, that's true.
You know,
That's true.
1991 book, I bet.
Yeah.
Dealt with the prophets.
Yes, that's true.
I was very embarrassed as
yeah.
a pastor one time that my children heard my son Benji says, I sent a policeman. Well, I told him to go somewhere I shouldn't have, but it wasn't how I said it. And we met his girlfriend for the first time. She came this last Christmas, New Year. And she said, Benji tells me you believe in hell. And I'm like, you know, where did that come from? And I'm like, Benji, and I said, and he said, oh yeah, I have no doubt. She told, and I think the context was, I was called to a problem by an immigrant family where there was some intervention of the police that was not acting in a fair way, and and didn't
It's not
understand,
compassion.
was not compassionate, was not listening to all sides, was not respectful. And when I showed up, and usually my kids were in tow because it was the middle of something happening. And the policeman was basically telling me he didn't have a choice. He was going to take these people in. And I knew somebody was going to end up getting deported or this was going to be a tragedy for the family that hadn't done anything wrong. And I told him, people like him made me believe in hell.
Benji heard that.
And he heard that. But I said, I think I asked him, do you believe that you have to do the right thing? When do you believe, and he said that basically the law is the law. And that's when I said that. But I just,
You know what this makes me think of, Maria?
yeah,
Like you said something in the heat of the moment that was pointed at a situation, and it was not characteristic of your whole view of life.
that's right.
I think let the dead bury the dead could have been a moment. Not really in control, but in the moment.
But yeah, but I think it's that hunger to have the world be fair and there be some punishment for people who act with lack of compassion. And maybe, but on the other hand, this cop was doing what the Levite was doing, following the law and the rules.
Right, and that's his job, right?
That's his job. So,
Sorry.
sorry, people have to go.
I'm
Well,
sorry to.
Thank you very much for,
Hi, Cindy. I'll probably have.
for being here today.
Okay.
Say goodbye to everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Margaret, you
I
want to
hope
say
you all
something?
have a
Somebody
wonderful.
wants to say.
No, she's just waiting.
I can't see her.
Margaret.
All right, you have a great day.
We're just,
Hi, Margaret.
but she's just driving, so she can't turn her mic on.
Oh.
Have a great week, everybody.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.